What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the Roundtable Sports Podcast. I am your host, John Newman, and today I will be talking about UFC Fight Night 154 coming up this Saturday in Greenville, South Carolina. But first, I kind of wanted to recap UFC 238 because, this is something that I have been digesting for some time, and now some more news has came out on Henry Cejudo, which I will get to here in a minute, involving an injury that could put him out for that will put him out for an extended period of time as he has undergone shoulder surgery. But for UFC 238, starting off, Tai Tuivasa and Blagoy Ivanov they've scrapped for, the first round was kind of interesting, seeing them couple of big boys move, but then they slowed down, and Ivanov was able to really control it with his grappling and his. I'm amazed actually at how strong Ivanov really is. He's a former combat sambo world champion, 18-2 as a professional mixed martial artist, former World Series of Fighting and PFL heavyweight champion. Now 2-1 in the UFC. His only loss came to Junior Dos Santos, and now he's looking to fight Derek Lewis next, which I think would be an interesting matchup with a strong, longer fighter like Derek Lewis facing off against Blagoy Ivanov, who is, a combat sambo world champion, like I already mentioned, kind of a very, very strong grappler. It would be interesting to see if Lewis can keep his distance against somebody who's also got, that power shot that once it connects, he can easily move in and gain control of the head, neck, and body with the way he grapples. He's not really a quick shoot, double leg, single leg guy. He's more true to, using that clinch to throw you to the ground, to using his weight to and your own weight to carry your ass to the ground. So I think, that'd be an interesting fight. And then Tai Tuivasa has, lost once again here in the UFC. And there's a guy named Justin Willis who's a bit pissed that, he didn't get a contract offer. He's been wanting to fight Tai Tuivasa for some time. They've had a social media feud going on. And I think, Sean Shelby, Dana White, they should consider letting Justin Willis sign a 1 or 2 fight, 3 fight deal, just a shorter contract, and try to, get Big Pretty in there against Bam Bam and see what happens. If Willis is able to win that fight, there's going to be plenty of people willing to throw their support that way, because the way that he stuck it to the organization and the way that he, has followed through on his word of getting that fight with Tuivasa. Hopefully that does happen. If it does not, I don't know where Big Pretty's going to go outside of the UFC to fight. He probably could go sign with Bellator or somewhere else, but I really think he wants to fight in the top level of the sport. And that's not to take anything away against Bellator, but the UFC has the top resources in the game as far as like pretty much everything goes. So that was the first fight on the UFC 238 card. The UFC 238 card also featured some welterweights with Peter Yan and Jimmy Rivera. And Yan was able to drop Rivera at the end of the first and second rounds. And the third round, Jimmy Rivera, showed some incredible heart to still be in that fight. And I thought, it was quite interesting. And I said welterweight. I meant to say bantamweight. It was quite interesting to see that what was going to take place with Rivera's karate style against Peter Yan's, boxing and moderately, good ground game. Everything that Peter Yan has in his arsenal has been, shown at some point, but I don't think it's been shown to its full potential. And, he kind of showed that power with those 2 knockdowns, and then, he was able to he was able to kind of, get Rivera to the ground at the end of the third scoring a takedown, I believe. Rivera was, not in the worst position by any means, but he ended the fight on his back and lost the fight. Petr Yan, kind of, a lot of people think might deserve this shot at the bantamweight title now that Henry is hurt. Same with Aljamain Sterling. So, Marlon Moraes probably going to have his pick, but he might not get a pick, and they might just throw Aljamain out there against him because Aljamain right now is the number 2 fighter. Petr Yan is the number 5 bantamweight in the division, I believe. He is climbing the ranks about as fast as anybody has ever climbed division ranks in the UFC. So he's on a fast track to a title shot if he can continue with the success. Congratulations to Petr Yan on that win. Jimmy Rivera, veteran of the sport, and showed really good heart in that fight. But, he was kind of held against the cage with Yan striking, just kind of backed him into the corner, put him in a phone booth, if you will. And, moving on, Ferguson versus Cerrone. Some people see it as the most exciting fight of the night. Cowboy and El Cucuy, they put together a really good, scrap, a stand and bang, if you will, in the first round. Ferguson just seemed to be moving away from every big shot to come back with something at an angle that Cerrone was, not seeing that much speed and power from anybody else, really. I think Ferguson's ability to just kind of roll away and come back with, the explosive power and speed that he possesses is it's dangerous for everybody in that lightweight division. In the second round, though, Cowboy was able to land a takedown, and Tony scrambled back to his feet very quickly. And then, like I said, pushing away, he kind of threw a spinning elbow and then a really fucking quick jab on the way back out. And it's just amazing how after he finishes, land or not land on a spinning strike, he's got, 1 or 2 more to follow it up. And we see a lot of guys go for that as, their power shot, and then they shell up, and then they let the other guy throw, and then they find another angle to hit him at with something, complex or simple, just like, Tony hits him with the complex thing first and then goes simple. And then, his ability to just change, angles and strikes and everything is pretty insane. At the end of that second round, Dan Miragliotta did not jump in at the immediate end, and Ferguson kind of landed a bruising strike just a split second or 2 after the round had ended. I honestly was at the bar. I did not hear the horn sound, so I thought it was a clean strike. But then I saw, kind of the discussion after, and, the doctors had to come in and stop the fight because of the swelling underneath of Cowboy's eye. Donald, his eye was turned into a slit pretty much. Don't think he was seeing very well out of that thing. From my perspective, I don't know. He might be able to see through his eyelid, though. I'm not sure. These guys are pretty freaking crazy. They deal with this stuff all the time. So Tony Ferguson was a bit disappointed by the outcome. I know he wanted to leave it all in the octagon a couple Saturdays ago, and the doctors stopped the fight. And, a lot of guys, they want it to end on their own terms, and Tony didn't get that outcome. He was, pretty upset by that, but there's a lot to look forward to if you're El Cucuy. In the future, you're going to get the winner of Dustin Poirier and Khabib Nurmagomedov. I think that, Khabib's going to win this fight, and then he's finally going to get, third time's the charm, hopefully, as far as, the scheduling of that fight has been, the first 2 times. First time, I believe Khabib got hurt. Second time, Tony got hurt, tore his ACL, was out, came back on, way faster than anybody ever predicted somebody in the MMA world could come back from torn ACL to have a great fight against Anthony Pettis, and then, follows it up here after, a significant amount of time off once again, fighting against Cowboy Cerrone. And I think, with the way that he has, dealt with the downtime that he's had in terms of selectively taking fights against big name guys is going to be beneficial once this Khabib and Tony fight finally goes down. And yes, I did just predict that Khabib is going to beat Dustin Poirier. No surprise if you've listened to any of my other MMA talks where I was looking really far ahead into the future, then yeah, you should know that I believe that Khabib Nurmagomedov is going to win. Let's not spend too much time there on the lightweights because, the highlight of the night came from the women's title fight. I believe it was the women's bantam. I'm not exactly sure. But Valentina Shevchenko, Bullet Valentina, landed some pretty nasty kicks, and one to the body, one to the head. And I'll kind of break down the fight. For the first round, Shevchenko got Jessica Eye to the ground, and for most of the first round, Jessica Eye was able to avoid significant damage and control the posture and positioning of Shevchenko from her back. She also avoided a really, nice submission attempt by Valentina and avoided the damage, and she ended the round on top of Shevchenko, which was, pretty interesting. Made it kind of like a she's not going to get a lot of people were like, okay, well, if she just ended that thing on top, she might not get dominated the way that everybody thought. But every fight starts on the feet. Every round starts on the feet. And Shevchenko landed a powerful kick to the body right before going upstairs for, that brutal head kick knockout. If you have not seen that, type in Valentina Shevchenko knocks out Jessica Eye on YouTube or wherever you watch fight highlights at, because that was, one of, the most brutal, devastating, and beautiful at the same time head kicks I think I have ever seen since watching the sport. It matches, some of those Lyoto the Dragon Machida head kicks and Mirko Krokop's brutal head kicks from Pride and whatnot. I think, that is something that can go pretty far in terms of growing Valentina Shevchenko's name and getting a big loyal fan base around her. I for one only really fanboyed towards one women's MMA fighter before, and that was well, I'll get into that, but I fanboyed to Rose Namajunas after seeing her knock out the Karate Hate live in person here in Kansas City. Please come back, UFC. But I now think, I've got possibly a new favorite in Bullet Valentina. That was crazy. That was the first time I watched a UFC fight at the bar, and I was there. Some of my boys from high school were there. It was pretty good watching the fights at the place that I watched it at, the Brass Rail here in Kansas City. Pretty good bar to watch UFC at. All right, that's a free plug for you. But anyways, Bullet Valentina was, what's next? Who are they going to line up against her? I feel like she's going to get, the treatment that, the lower ranked girls don't want to fight her, and they probably, are scared of taking that title shot too early. Because, women's MMA is pretty young. A lot of these girls are fairly young in this game as well. Valentina is more of a veteran martial artist who is just, very grateful and thankful to be a member of the UFC and be able to showcase her talent to so many people. I loved what she did in the octagon, and I liked her reaction too. She was kind of just stone-faced, and then she was thankful that Jessica got up after in the commentary after it. So moving into our bantamweight title fight, which was the main event. Moving on from that co-main event that had the highlight of the night. Marlon Moraes and Henry Cejudo had a pretty solid first round. Moraes controlled most of that first round, staying on the outside, chopping him down with some leg kicks as Henry moved in for a single leg at one point, and realized he couldn't get it. Moraes uppercutted him on his way back up, and it was pretty powerful. And then he continued to pour on some more leg kicks, and it kind of, slowed Henry down. He had to switch his stance to southpaw, and there was just, no volume of strikes. But, great corner work from Henry Cejudo. They told him to go forward and take the fight to Marlon, and he was able to land to Moraes' jaw in the second round, coming out of that southpaw stance, and he kept his guard high, avoided a lot of the leg kicks, got out of the way, and he switched back and started landing some rights. And he started landing in the clinch scrambles, and he hit a nice uppercut, a few knees in the clinch, and then, boom, third round comes around. He is now very, very confident in the fact that he has damaged Marlon with some of the kicks. He, lands a big body. He kind of gets into, I think he was shooting for a double, and then he kind of body locked him and put him against the cage, and then on the scramble out of that, because Moraes is, a very strong guy. He doesn't want to just hold him against the fence for the whole time so he can squeeze the blood out of his arms and whatnot. He just landed a very nice punch on the way out, and then they called time for an eye poke, which I didn't see even on the replay. If you slowed it down enough, maybe on the pull away he stuck a finger out or whatnot. It looked like a pretty clean punch to me, but it definitely affected Moraes' vision, and Henry was able to, in this third round, get Marlon to his back, and then Marlon kind of went for an armbar, but in going for that armbar, Cejudo was able to free up enough space to start landing some hammer fists that were pretty powerful. And then he kind of thought gas tank, saved himself a little bit. And once he was back closer, he used some elbows to gain that separation, postured up, landed a bunch of hammer fists. And some people would call it an early stoppage TKO because of the amount of time left in the round. I think there was less than 10 seconds left in the round. But I think if that thing went on 3-4 more seconds, you got, 5-6 more strikes to the head of Moraes just because of, how Henry was just laying it on him at that point. I think, they might have saved the lights from going out on Moraes, but the referee might have saved the lights from going out. But, the fight fan in me does want to see the fourth round of that and see how that goes, see if Moraes could recover, and if Cejudo's confidence just continues in the fourth round, like I would predict that's what it would have been had they gone into the fourth round. Henry would have been able to just kind of, play his game, wait for the timing to set up the takedown, and try to, beat Moraes when Moraes was on his back. And I guess that's how the fight ended in the third round. But Cejudo, he did a great job. Like I said, those knees in the clinch were pretty filthy. I thought, Henry Cejudo might be historically the most accomplished fighter in the game. Olympic gold medalist. He is a 2 separate division simultaneous champion, and he dubbed himself Triple C. A lot of people are like, oh, I hate when he talks. It's so cringy. It's like, dude, there's been cringy champions for years in the UFC. Henry Cejudo, I get what you're saying. I don't know. I used to watch the WWE whenever I was a kid, so I have like a high tolerance for the cringiness and the promotion of things. But nonetheless, I thought it was a great win for Henry Cejudo, but so disappointing that he has to have shoulder surgery. I wonder what exactly it is, because I know that there is, some pretty long recovery a lot of long recovery surgeries for the shoulder labrum, the rotator cuff, that sort of thing. Takes quite some time to repair, but Henry's going to have top of the line training staff around him just to get that shoulder back into top shape. And on top of that, maybe some time off from the sparring and whatnot, and this layoff does him maybe a little bit of good, but hopefully it doesn't bring about any rust. We have seen it have an adverse effect on some guys. I'll get into how the time off affected one of the guys main eventing in UFC Fight Night 154. So without further ado, let's take it to the action that's going to go down in Greenville, South Carolina. I'm not sure if they've ever had a UFC event in South Carolina. It probably is the first one that they will have. Maybe not the most well-known fighters on this card. There is the first fight of the night is a couple of women fighters that I do not actually know. I need to do maybe some background checks on that. See where they came from, if they fought in other leagues, if they came from the tough house like Montana De La Rosa. But I'll just start my breakdown with Kevin Holland, who I heard on is it the UFC Unfiltered podcast with Jim Norton and Matt Serra. He's a 6'3" fighter with an 81-inch reach advantage, which is very big for the middleweight. He's fighting Alicio Di Chirico, who is coming off of a win against Julian Marquez at 190, because Marquez was unable to make 185 in that fight. And shout out Julian Marquez, he is from Kansas City, but that was, I believe, not too tough of a loss for Julian. So, yeah, Julian was able to get that contract out of the Dana White Contender Series just like Kevin Holland was. And Holland immediately fought Thiago Santos, who is moved up division now in his first fight after that. But, he wasn't able to get it. He lost by decision, I believe, to Santos. And then he's won his 2 fights since then. So... And just listening to him on the podcast, he seemed pretty confident in his ability to beat Alicio Di Chirico. So I'll take Kevin Holland. We will say, maybe a 3-round decision. Not sure. But the second fight I was going to break down here, it's the third fight on the main card, is Andrea Lee versus Montana De La Rosa. Andrea Lee just coming off of a win against Ashley Evans Smith. She is a karate black belt, a judo brown belt, a jiu-jitsu brown belt, and a crew master in Muay Thai. So she's pretty diverse in terms of what she knows. It's all about putting all of that together in a fight. That's what mixed martial arts is about. She has a small 1.5-inch reach advantage over Montana De La Rosa. Both of them are the same height. Montana De La Rosa is a 3-time All-American purple belt. And she's also a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, 3-time All-American wrestler, is coming off of wins against Rachel Ostovich and Nadia Kassem, and both of those were by submission. She came from the Ultimate Fighter house. I briefly mentioned that earlier. And yeah, so that's a tough one for me to call. I've never seen either of them fight. I might have actually seen De La Rosa fight when she was on Tough. I'm not exactly sure. I don't watch every single season, every single episode of that. I need to start getting more into that, though, in the Tuesday Night Contenders series. But, I need to get myself equipped with the UFC Fight Pass. And, I had that for a long period of time last year, actually. I caught up on that show, the history of fighting or whatever it is, where Fabricio Verdum went and he explored the different areas of martial arts. I thought that was a pretty cool show, and kind of made the time that I had it worth it, because I was just binging that over and older fights, some of the best of Pride and whatnot, while I had the service last year. And I think it's well worth it if you are a fan of fighting, Die Hard. Next up, third fight from the top here, Bryan Barberena versus Randy Brown. I've seen Barberena fight in that loss to Vincent Luque, so maybe my opinion's skewed a little bit, but Randy Brown is also coming off of a loss to Nico Price. Nico Price, kind of a veteran of other, one other promotion, and then comes to the UFC. He's been here for quite some time, and maybe feels, a bit slighted by the fact that he's won so many and he hasn't gotten a name that's ranked yet. But this isn't about Nico Price. This is about, his last opponent, Randy Brown, who he was able to beat. They're fighting at 170 at welterweight here. And Randy Brown's 4-3 in the UFC. Bryan Barberena 5-4 in the UFC. And like I said, I haven't really seen a whole lot of either of them. So I guess I'll just move on. I'll make the prediction. I'll go ahead and take the younger. I believe Randy Brown's younger. He's got less fights under his belt. I'll take Randy Brown, I guess. Blue corner. It'll be the first blue corner that I've taken. And then John Lineker and Rob Font. It's a rematch. And Rob Font, I also heard him on Unfiltered this week. He's coming off a victory over Sergio Pettis last December. He's 6-3 in the UFC. And Lineker's coming off of a split decision loss to Corey Sandhagen. A lot of people were like, okay, that could have gone either way. But, a loss is a loss. Hopefully it doesn't damage confidence. It might add fuel to his fire for wanting to come out here and win his next fight. Oh my goodness, my sound quality is looking like shit. So, yeah, I'm sorry about if this sound is so messed up or whatnot. I'm trying to get a condenser for my new microphone so I can use it to its full potential. The one that came with it was kind of crappy and adds a buzz to the background. Sorry about the kind of spiel on the audio quality or whatnot. But, Font is the longer fighter with more reach. Lineker is younger with more experience. And this is a rematch where Lineker's already won this fight one time. I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen, though, because in the UFC, a lot of the time, the rematches are completely different fights. And I think Lineker said this is going to be a different fight than the first time. So, that could go either way, in my opinion. Moving on, let's go to the main event. Chan Sung Jung, Renato Moicano. Moicano is coming off of a loss to Jose Aldo, in which he was TK'd. He was TKO'd. The best win of his career is against, in my opinion, there's two veterans he's beat, and then there's, an up-and-comer in Calvin Kattar in April of 2018 that he beat. But he's also beat Cub Swanson and Jeremy Stevens. So Moicano's got, some pretty big wins under his belt. Chan Sung Jung, he is also coming off of a loss in his last fight, and he's taken a lot of time off since then. He was kind of winning and dominating in this fight, and he lost by vicious elbow at I think 5-6 seconds left in that fight. He would have won that fight and whatnot, but Chan Sung Jung, for those of you that don't know, spent 4 years away from the sport, serving in the Korean military as a requirement of every male citizen of that country. He is 1-1 since returning. He beat Dennis Bermudez by a first round KO, and then that loss that I just mentioned in his last fight to Yair Rodriguez. Sung Jung has beaten Dustin Poirier, and that was quite a long time ago, but he kind of started the fall off of Dennis Bermudez and started, a big losing streak for Bermudez. Not to, talk shit on Dennis or anything, but, he's up there in age and he's kind of fallen off. So, I'm not sure if he has already stepped away from the sport or whatnot. Should be starting to think about that door and what you can make after, you close it and you look inside. That's what a lot of fighters have done. They close the door on their fighting career. They look inside at what, connections they've made and what they can build from those connections, and they build something great from it. A lot of them do a lot of work outside of fighting, and yeah. So that's kind of my wrap up on that. I think my prediction will be Chan Sung Jung. I'm going to take the Korean Zombie over Renato Moicano. I think I just like the Korean Zombie for whatever reason. I've seen him fight, and he just, he's balls to the wall. He really is pretty balls to the wall. And he seemed a lot more technical in his last fight against Yair, as Yair went more balls to the wall. And then at the end, he got caught with that. If you have not seen this, oh my goodness, look it up. Yair Rodriguez knocks out Chan Sung Jung. This elbow comes from the oddest angle I think I've ever seen. I don't think my shoulders are healthy, intact. Same with biceps, elbows. All of my arms are intact. I don't think I can throw an elbow at the angle that he threw that at. He must have had to dislocate something just to throw that, or it could come from flexibility, just from how many different styles that he trains in, especially jiu-jitsu. That's pretty good for flexibility as well. I think that's going to be a wrap on this episode of the podcast. I'm looking forward to the events that the UFC has got coming up. He will be fighting Thiago Santos here on July 6th. John Jones, sorry. John Jones will be fighting Thiago Santos. That's an interesting matchup. I think Santos, is going to come in here and he's going to be surprised that, the UFC, he's kind of, as he's started in the sport, he's gotten some pretty good wins, but, John Jones is head and shoulders above the rest, and I just don't see any way that Jones is going to lose at UFC 239. UFC 238 with Dustin and Khabib headlining is, another big thing to look forward to as a martial arts fan. I watched some Bellator this past weekend, and I've got to say, man, I think what they do with the veterans, just keeping them around, it's okay, but Chael Sonnen just wasn't even fighting against the Dragon. I thought Lyoto was just kind of also what the hell is this guy doing against me right now? I should be fighting your champion, and I think Lyoto will have a championship belt in Bellator very, very soon. Lyoto, he's down to 170. Well, he's been fighting at 170 or 185. Sorry, 170. That would be insane for somebody his size. No, he's fighting at 185. So I believe Gegard Mousasi is their champion, and Machida's probably going to beat him. I mean, let's face it, Machida, I don't know. You can't take anything away from Gegard Mousasi, though, as well. He was, up and coming and rising through the UFC when he decided to go to Bellator. So, I really don't know. But I think Machida could beat Ryan Bader pretty easily. I think he'd beat Phil Davis as well. I think, he's probably, the top of the big guys. And, Bader is a 2-division champion there, and he couldn't touch gold in the UFC. Matt Mitrione and Czech Congo are 2 and 3 in their heavyweight division, and okay, all right. It's just washed up, or potentially one day could be successful in the UFC, guys. I don't know, And then you go down to welterweight and you're talking, Rory McDonald, probably one of the best welterweights in the world. Not going to take anything away from Rory. But, and then Douglas Lima is pretty good as well. Then you get John Fitch, another guy kind of wishy-washy in the UFC. Paul Daly, guys like that. And then you go down to lightweight and you're looking at Pitbull, Patricky, Bendo, Michael Chandler, just kind of like, okay, they got some cool get ups and whatnot, and I love their intros, their transitions, their highlights, all of it. Their commentary is very solid. Like, I'll continue to watch, but I don't think I'm ever gonna pay money to see it. I'll get on Facebook Live or something and find somebody who streams it, because it's just it's almost almost not worth the time to watch, let alone spend money on it. But I don't want to burn the bridge. I just want to let people know that it's not the UFC over there at Bellator. It's fun. It's fun. Fighters love fighting for them. Like I said, I love the commentary. I love the presentation. It's just their talent pool will never be able to match, and I think they've accepted that fact, that their talent pool just cannot match. You go to their welterweight division, though. You got Rory McDonald. He could match, but yeah, I don't want to burn the bridge between me and Bellator or anything. I've just grown up on the UFC and haven't been a huge. There hasn't been a huge interest towards Bellator, especially because I don't even believe Fedor fought for them more than maybe 1 or 2, 3 fights, something like that. Never mind. I just looked it up. He's fought 4 times. He got knocked out by Ryan Bader, and I think he just inked a new 3-fight deal or something with Bellator. So hopefully he comes back, knocks Ryan Bader out of his career, and I don't know though. Fedor's up there in age. I mean, he's got to be shit. I'll look it up real quick. I think I'm already on the right page that'll show his age. Let me see. Yeah, he's 42 years old. So big freaking deal. I don't, if they would have had Fedor against the UFC's heavyweight division when Brock was around, then yeah. But I believe he was still in K1 at that time, or whatever his M1 or Strikeforce. Strikeforce was a great promotion. I really liked Strikeforce. I think they were possibly second best of all time. And now Bellator has, put the stamp on it that, they put the DAZN stamp on it. They've got that TV package, whatnot. It's not as expensive. The fights are still pretty interesting. They're good. But if you want to make it interesting, go and scout where the UFC scouts with the European MMA. They got, McGregor over there from I believe the Cage Warriors. They've gotten, some good fighters from there. Go find, go find you some of those European MMA fighters. Go find you some Dagestanis. Go get these guys that want to make it to the top level where they're fighting incredibly good competition. And maybe one day you can compete. I seriously doubt it, just because of the allure of the UFC, the promotion, the fact that it's covered on ESPN. Nowadays, it's crazy to think that ESPN owns the TV deal. Meanwhile, you're working for DAZN over there at Bellator. Nothing against DAZN or anything. It's just like they're simply not on every household or basic. I mean, if you get an antenna TV still in America and hook it up to it, you can find ESPN and see the highlights after the fights happen. Or, I mean, some of those times you even get ESPN and ESPN2 on those things, and you can still freaking watch, the reruns of the fights. So, before Bellator starts to compete with the UFC, they need to increase their talent pool and maybe, get a network deal with someone bigger than just DAZN. I know Strikeforce had a deal with CBS and CBS Sports, and they had, a talent pool that was filled with, I believe, the Diaz brothers fought for them. Like I just said, Fedor fought for them. There was, some solid guys that fought there and then had some success in the UFC too. So, yeah, I kind of walking back me ragging on Bellator, I know how difficult it is for a promotion to compete with the UFC. I mean, I wonder if Bellator actually has diehard fans. I'm sure they do that really see that as better competition than the UFC. But I don't know. I've grown up around mixed martial arts, and I see the UFC today might not be the best in certain divisions as it's been in the past, but it is, once again, top to bottom, every weight division you were to take, the top 50 fighters out of the UFC, the top 50 fighters out of Bellator, and schedule them on weight and rank, you would find the UFC completely dominant. All right, I think that's it for today. Oh, shout out Jack Hager, Jack Swagger with the dub. Is it Jake Hager? I don't even know it. He got another victory. Dylan Dennis got a victory too. Big deal. He's 2-0 in MMA now. At least he's undefeated though. At least he's undefeated. Don't be starting shit with the Dagestanis. That's all I gotta say. Don't be starting shit with the people that have defended their fucking land for so long. You fucking piece of shit. No, I really don't have anything against him. It's just like, come on, you don't have to say the shit that you said. That's just disrespectful to what our flag stands for and what the Dagestani flag represents. Fighting for what's right in terms of not giving in to communism and the big government that's going to take what's yours and try to profit from it. Okay, all right. Thanks a lot for listening. This episode of the podcast is done. Follow me on Twitter @TalkMoreSports.